That essentially means that no matter where you are in your sales career, there's learning to be had if you keep your eyes and ears open.
Hey, so today we're joined by Bhandari. He's a VP of Sales at Fossa. The theme is going to be about how we enter sales folks into the profession and everything around that. So welcome, Samir.
Thanks, Tom. Pleasure to be here.
Yeah, awesome. So the first question we'll actually discuss right now, Samir, is actually one about you. So what is your sales leadership philosophies and how has your life impacted your approach?
Sure, that's a great place to start. So I genuinely live by three philosophies that have helped me kind of navigate my career and get to the point where I am today. One is that the learning never stops, and that essentially means that no matter where you are in your sales career, there's learning to be had if you keep your eyes and ears open. The second philosophy I've always lived by is I've never worked for anyone that I haven't been able to learn from or see a mentor or see him or her as a mentor. And I've really been fortunate to have some just phenomenal leaders that I've worked for through my career. And the third thing is that no two sales are ever the same. And what I mean by that is the fact that, salespeople often get into this mode when you've had a good year or a good quarter or a few good quarters or a few good years behind you, that you feel like you've pretty much seen it all. And trust me, you haven't. I've been in sales leadership roles in 3 different organizations. And it's been a brand new journey. Almost, I feel like a undergrad myself every time I've switched jobs or picked up a new role. So yeah, those are my 3 philosophies that I live by.
Fantastic. And it sounds like the uniting string there for all of those is one of an open mindset and learning, whether that be from your mentor to not expect or to expecting the unexpected.
Yeah, and I'll even flip that from the perspective that when people deal with salespeople, I ask a lot of my friends, a lot of my colleagues, when I are working with them on pursuits, etc., or guiding them or mentoring them through pursuits, is what's the first reaction that you get when people know that they're going to be talking to a salesperson? And it's between an eye roll and a can we make this call go any faster? And the reason for that is that I think there's just this kind of fatigue in dealing with salespeople because customers know what they want. The customers today are very educated, and it's irrespective of what field. So I think if you play the role of a consultant or if you play the role of a partner, you're more than likely to land a sale versus come in there and sell what you have. And sometimes that means to say we're not the best fit. I've done that in my career plenty of times where the immediate sale is tempting, but the loss of reputation and value, I think is far greater a risk to take than foregoing a sale for now. But yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I'm glad you bring up the perceptions of sales folks, because this is one that definitely impacts people thinking about getting into the role or just before they get in. Now, if you're a young sales rep, you have your quota. Maybe sometimes you miss because plenty do. You feel the pressure of that target. How does this interact with this confidence that we have to sometimes say no? Like, how do we get to the position where we can sometimes decline? How can we overcome the pressure of the target to behave in the right way, I suppose, as a salesperson?
Yeah, I think that's a good question. I think an effective salesperson is one who continues to ask him or himself or herself the question, which is, if I make this sale today, can I go back to this person or this prospect or this customer in 6 months to a year, and that person will still be willing to talk to me for an upsell or a future sell? And if the answer to that question is yes, right, then that's the right sale to make. If the answer to that question is, that depends, did I forward sell too much? Did I forward lean forward too much into the sale? Did I sell features that were not really there, but were coming down the pike, or so on and so forth? So that's kind of my yardstick for, or that would be my best advice to kind of budding salespeople who are tempted to meet numbers and meet commissions and meet quotas. Is ask yourself the question: would you be able to go back to this customer in 6 months to a year, and would they be willing to take your call? And if the answer is yes, you're in the right business and you're making the right sale.
Yeah, great answer, and it makes a ton of sense from a personal perspective. If we also applied that to a revenue leader, like a VP of sales or CRO, would you be happy, or very hypothetical here, understand that, but would you be more or less happy with the rep missing target but making sales that didn't churn and that had upsell and that were the right sale, versus perhaps meeting target with the opposite of that effect?
Yeah, and I'll be fairly open about this. The answer is yes. I choose the former rep any day of the week over the latter. And quite honestly, I think most mature sales programs have this term, which is not a favorite with salespeople, called clawbacks. That's why we put them there, which is, if you made a sale which was just to push a few dollars through, right, and the customer finds no value, I mean, that damage is permanent. And to overcome that damage, it's going to be a combination of getting your execs involved, or getting the C-suite involved, or having to discount heavily to avoid kind of loss of reputation, so on and so forth. And it's not so much about the upper hand or the lower hand, or who has the upper hand in the deal. I think it's more about, every sale is a trust building process. And if you're not building that trust every step of the way, I'd take the former rep any day of the week.
Okay, this is great. So distilling from this conversation, Samir, we like sales folks who are curious, who stay curious, and they act with high levels of integrity. So I'm interested to hear for you as a leader, how this applies to your recruitment process. And actually, even if we went before a recruitment process to people thinking about getting into sales, what that means for those people too.
Yeah, and this is one that's always been a little bit controversial, because I think recruitment comes down to what a leader is looking for, and I network a fair bit with sales leaders in my space, and all of us tend to look for different things, right? Recruitment for me, Tom, boils down to curiosity, especially when I'm looking for a first timer, or I'm looking for a younger kind of sales personnel to recruit. And what I mean by curiosity is, who's the one asking the questions, right? And I'm always a big fan of, when I interview people, and I've built teams, I think over the last 10, 12 years, I've always favored the profile of person that has more questions than I do on the interview. And I've always favored the profile of person that lends himself or herself to a lot of curiosity. If I'm able to walk away from the interview with, this person was actually here to learn, right? Especially when they're early on in their career and they don't have too much history in the sales process, that's kind of like the number one thing that I'm looking for. Look, experience. I always go by a quote that I repeat very often, which is the only stupid question is the one you don't ask. Right. And if people in their early years show that hunger for learning, curiosity, I think that's the right profile. I think things like product, things like deal making, things like all of those can be learned, can be taught over a period of time. Everyone develops their own style over a period of time. But curiosity, if it's there from the early stage, and the hunger for learning is there from the early stage, that never goes away.
Yeah, so we're touching on vulnerability there in sales. Interested to hear, Samir, how we can encourage a culture where being vulnerable is okay on sales floors.
Yeah, that's a good question, in the sense that I think most salespeople shy away from being vulnerable, but I think vulnerability also shows imperfections. And I think in today's day and age, especially where a lot of the selling is remote, I think it's become even more important to be very upfront with vulnerabilities. I'll give you a true example without naming the customer. I was on a pricing call with a team member yesterday, right? This is an existing customer. We're going in for an upsell. It's important for us as a company. We're a very early stage company, and they truly see value in our product, right? We presented, based on an earlier call, we presented a couple of pricing options. And like all good customers, they came back and said too expensive. And part of the discussion that we had post them telling us that was about the fact that, look, at the stage of the company that we're at, we're hungrier, right? We're willing to learn, right? And we're willing to kind of grow our product with them. So to say you're not perfect, right? Or this is a take it or leave it, I think is a way of showing vulnerability. And what we came away from that call with, which was very encouraging, was we threw out a third option and we said, look, what if we did option X? And they were like, okay, that kind of makes sense. So let's put pen to paper and let's reconvene. So the point I'm making is it's completely okay to be open, be vulnerable, and be able to say I'm not perfect. I mean, if imagine this, if by nature we were not vulnerable, that doesn't only impact your professional life, that starts to impact your personal life as well. I mean, who in their personal life ever went back and said, I've learned everything I could, right? Or I have nothing more. No one can teach me anything more, right? Even at my stage today, I consider myself vulnerable. I consider myself vulnerable because there are people on my team that know the product better than I do. There's people on my team that probably can be someday a better leader than I am today. And to be able to be open to that and accept that and absorb that from other people and be open about it, I think has got me to a point in my career where the one thing my teams have for me is respect. And respect brings collaboration. Respect brings partnerships. So you work a lot better. In a nutshell, I'd say the best way to coach or the best advice I can give for vulnerability is the fact that before you're going into a big call, right, that you feel is going to make or break it for you, prepare a list of things that you know and a list of things you don't know, and be prepared to talk about them. I think that's the best coaching I can give.
I like producing a list of things you don't know. I think reps are often thinking about their talk tracks, areas they're going to demo, but maybe not the things they're not sure about yet.
Yeah.
So it sounds like for you, Samir, vulnerability is actually framed as a positive thing because it's something we can either get better at or a way we can form a more meaningful relationship with someone.
Yes, and you're touching on this kind of via different questions, Tom. But you've used the word relationship a few times now, right? That's what sales is. If you're not establishing relationships, you're not selling. It's easy to sell and move on, right? But the fact that I went and met a customer of mine who was a customer in a previous company just a week ago is testament to the relationships we build in the sales process. And of course, they'll do business with you if the new company you join or things like that. There's a difference between networking and building relationships, right? Networking is like-minded professionals, learning, absorbing, so on and so forth. Building relationships, in my mind, is making sure that the people that you've built those relationships with are trusting you, are trusted partners who would go out on a limb and do business with you just because they know you, they trust you, and they know you work the right way and follow a set of ethics. I think a lot of times salespeople confuse networking activities with building relationships. They're two very different things. I network for completely different reasons, and I build relationships for completely different reasons.
Yeah, it's a good dissection. I think we have a really clear picture of what a good sales culture can look like. So the question might come to, how does this change as things scale? We're a VP right now, and perhaps our team is a bit smaller. We have direct oversight over most of our reps and how they work. As we get bigger, and perhaps we want to encourage leadership from within, we lose control to a degree. So how does nurturing leadership values in the upcoming leaders look, basically? How do we make sure these aren't lost on our next level of management?
If you were expecting a magical answer, I'm about to disappoint you. But
No.
it actually comes down to you look at any sports, right? A player coach, right, brings a different perspective to a game versus a coach that's never played the game but is very good at strategy. I believe sales is a player coach kind of arena, right? Is a player coach profession. And the big changes that need to happen as you scale. And I've been part of two companies in the past that started out privately. One of them went public, so we scaled tremendously. And the other one just, was in a hyper growth phase and a hyper growth industry. And I spent about 3.5 years with them, and they scaled tremendously during that time. The thing that changes is you've got to be able to, as a leader, be able to trust and delegate, but at the same time, you've got to be able to come up with a playbook for situations. I'll give you an example. With Fossa, the company that I'm currently with and excited for their journey, we're putting together a sales playbook because we're anticipating scaling next year, right? In that playbook is a ton of guides and processes to what the sales process looks like and what sales enablement can look like. But at the end of the day, I have to trust my team to take pieces of that playbook and implement them as they see fit. My job eventually is to turn into a coach, which is I can guide the sales process. I can opine on the sales process. We do our weekly meetings on Mondays, right, where we talk through our deals and outbound campaigns and so on and so forth. What that shows me, or what that shows them, is that I have oversight of the program and what I'm doing, but I'm not pulling the puppet strings, right? I'm not the puppet master. They're masters of their own destiny. And I almost kind of tend to disagree with the fact that companies that are in early stage, that sales leaders want to have a lot of control. If you're like me, I like to give up control from the early days, because that becomes your culture then. And then the change it's not difficult, right? And when it also works great during recruitment, when early stage companies, you have whoever you're trying to recruit talk to your existing team, and they say, look, it's a pretty decentralized culture. We run our own playbooks, and we get guidance when we need it, right? But there's a difference again between guidance and interference, right? So I think from my perspective personally, I think decentralization or delegation is an early stage trait as well. You don't have to wait to scale to do that. I think the only thing that changes as you scale is your processes are a must, and data tends to get more and more complex. So if you have a good understanding of the business and you have a good understanding of data that the business throws up, I think scaling becomes a lot easier.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Yeah, you're right. Let's not make assumptions about what a typical culture in a small, medium, large scale business looks like. Brilliant. Cool. So final question. If you're in a room full of the best sales leaders, or even leaders in general, to be honest, the best ones to ever do it, what would you ask them?
I'd ask them what's next. Because I think it's a question that I've grappled with, right? You continue to build sales organizations, right? What comes next for sales? Because that's the answer I'm searching for. And I don't mean my next job. I just mean, what's the next level of evolution once you've been recognized or tagged as a successful sales leader? And I don't think any of us have really figured out the answer yet. But I'd also I'll take the liberty of adding kind of one more thought is, are you a coach or are you a leader? That's the question I want to ask, because I look for, I think you figured out a theme by now, I'm guessing, but I look for subtle differences in personalities and the way people run things. I tend to run things as a coach. A lot of people, a coach who can step up to a leader. Which one's better? A coach that can step up to a leader, or a leader that can step up to being a coach? But yeah, I think I would definitely ask a room full of successful sales leaders about kind of what's next for us. Like, where do we go from here? What's that next big thing that we can contribute to and give back? Because I'm a fan of giving back. No point being successful if you can't give it back.
That's a good point, that one, to finish on. I wonder if it's something about sales where you chase targets, you meet targets, you chase bigger targets, and you become a leader, X, Y, Z. I wonder if it becomes hardwired to sales folks to always think about what next, and what more can I do?
Absolutely. I think To put a finer point on it, Tom, I think sales is like any other career, right? It's not temporary. It gives you a high. The highs are very high. The lows are very low. And just like, an artist or a writer can come up with like an artist's block or a writer's block, salespeople have blocks that they find, mental blocks that they find difficult to overcome every now and then too. I mean, a couple of deals going south can have a devastating impact on an up and comer, right? And that's the time it's up to people like us to kind of coach them through that, right? To be able to kind of say, you know what, it's okay. Like, guess what? In my 15-year career, I've lost a ton of deals, right? But I won more than I lost. Because again, everything comes down to kind of like a sports analogy lately. But at the end of the day, at the end of the season, it's where you made it is what matters, right? How many losses you had on the way. But if you still came out on top, those losses were well worth it as long as you learned from them.